Good afternoon, everyone. It's a bit scary to sound this loud, so if this is a bit too loud, you can just wave your something. Is this okay? All right. So let me just start to thank everyone who came here this Friday afternoon. As an organizer of events, you know that Friday afternoons, this auditorium could be sort of half empty. But I think the fact that you are all here just shows how important this topic is to all of us. So I just think we should actually give all of us that are here tonight a warm hand of welcome. So for those that don't know me from all of our events, I'm Torbjörn Becker. I'm the director of the Stockholm Institute of Transition Economics here at the Stockholm School of Economics. I also want to mention here, of course, that I'm a very proud board member of the Kyiv School of Economics. I'm also one of the founders of Friends of KC, which is a charity that we have started here in Sweden to support our friends in Ukraine in their important work. We only have 1 hour for this panel, and we have a lot of exciting things that will go on after this panel. So I'm not going to take a lot of your time here. I think we all understand why we're discussing investing in Ukraine's future. And I really want to give an extra warm hand of welcome to Alina from the Nordic Ukraine Forum. She is really the key organizer of this event. None of us would have been here tonight without Alina's all work and enthusiasm. And it's really an honor for me to welcome you on stage to share some introductory words. So again, warm hand to Alina.
Thank you. Dear distinguished guests, Your Excellencies, dear friends of Ukraine, I'm thrilled to stay on this stage and open this event because you can understand how for me, Ukrainian and other organizations that represent Ukraine here, it is crucial to talk about Ukraine and its future under these circumstances. And I'm so grateful for you to finding time coming today because I know that it's very hectic periods of time. You have a lot of busy schedules. So I'm really grateful that you are here with us. And I'm also very grateful to the speakers because we have really fantastic speakers who will contribute a lot, and I hope you will leave this room with enthusiasm and a lot of plans and investing and supporting Ukraine. And finally, last but not the least, I'm very grateful for our partners, the Stockholm Institute of Transition Economics, to Torbjörn Becker for hosting this event, for accepting this invitation to do something about Ukraine now here. And not to take your time anymore, I would like to wish you a fruitful discussion and see you all in the mingle later. Thank you.
Thank you, Alina. So let me just start by sharing some of the practical notes for this evening, which is that we will have a panel discussion now for about an hour. I will soon present you to the panel speakers here. But afterwards, as Alina mentioned, we will have an interesting set of offerings out in the auditorium afterwards. So I hope you're not feeling too stressed out on a Friday afternoon and have to rush away for something else, because you will have culture, you would have wine, food, and excellent conversations around this. So anyway, this is the plan for this evening. And with that, let me introduce to you our panel speakers. I would like to invite the ambassador from Ukraine here to Sweden, Andrii Plakhotniuk. Warm hand for you, please. Pick your favorite seat. We then have Ulrik Tideström. He's the special envoy for Ukraine from the Swedish government. Warm hand to Ulrik. We have Esben Gadsbøll, co-founder of Defense Innovation Highway. Please, welcome. We have our good friend, Judith Gough. I'm not supposed to say ambassador anymore, apparently.
No.
Senior Strategic Advisor to Actagon. Please, welcome to the stage. And of course, we have Roman Washchuk, Business Ombudsman. I want to tell all of our foreign guests that Ombudsman is, of course, a Swedish word that we managed to sell to the rest of the world. It's probably the only one. Warm welcome to the stage. Also a former ambassador here. So the topic for this night's evening's conversation is really about the partnerships between Nordic countries and Ukraine, how we actually can build a better future here together. I'm a little bit embarrassed to say that we only have the Swedish and Ukraine flags here, so apologies to all our Nordic friends, but I know that we have one representative from Denmark here who will make up for our little mistake on this side. But really, I just want to start with this simple thing that having good neighbors, having strong neighbors is to the benefit of all of us. And I think strong neighbors and partnership starts really with these meetings. People have to actually meet each other, create this trust. And one of the ways that we are trying to contribute to this is, of course, developing academic network with Ukraine and in this region. And I think this is something that's perhaps for good reasons in this current situation forgotten, this human dimension of the future of all of our countries. It's very easy to see destroyed bridges, destroyed hospitals, destroyed energy infrastructure, etc. And then we also, unfortunately, have to think about how can actually countries defend themselves when they're under attack. And I think we have all had to make a little bit change of our mindsets when it comes to how we think about defense industry and what kind of innovations and investments we need to do in our countries to actually remain prosperous and live in peace and with good neighbors. And I think all of our speakers here will touch on different aspects of this. And of course, not least this interaction between how the private sector, the public sector, academia, civil society, we all need to work together to make this happen. And I think our panel here is a very good mix of all of these things. So I'm very happy that we can have this conversation. I will start at the end of the table with Ambassador. An actual ambassador, still ambassador, as I've now learned, you're not, yeah, okay. So please, can you give us maybe your insights on how we can work together to invest in our common future? Please.
Should I press any buttons? No.
No.
Distinguished guests, dear ambassadors, dear distinguished co-panelists, dear Torbjörn, two messages at the start. Definitely congratulations to Nordic Ukraine Forum on their 10th anniversary. I think excellent partnership, excellent events organized, and excellent prospects for further joint activities to support of Ukraine. And definitely gratitude to Torbjörn for hosting this event today. When it comes to this important discussion that we are going to have today, a couple of points from our perspective. Over the last year, we've seen a huge intensification of cooperation within different formats of regional cooperation here, be it Northern N5 so-called format and be it the format of Nordic and Baltic states. And we've seen many practical events on how to boost cooperation and how to make it most effective. And in this regard, we definitely commend the Swedish presidency during this year for active presidency and for arranging a lot of events. So it's very important, in our opinion, to have this intensified cooperation because of the challenges that we are now facing in Ukraine, facing the pure escalation from the Russian Federation and some other players like North Korea and Iran. So in our opinion, it's really high time to intensify political cooperation between the Nordic and Baltic states and Poland and other partners here, definitely United Kingdom, in order to support Ukraine more effectively. And this could be achieved not only by intensifying the packages of assistance that we receive and that for which we are so grateful to our partners, but also when it comes to industrial cooperation, technological cooperation, and investment cooperation. So when we see current situation when North Koreans can produce a lot of ammunition, and we still have a lot of things to do when it comes to this issue in our countries. Definitely we should ramp up the production, we should set up enterprises, we should invest in Ukraine, and as a starting point for that could be our definitely defense industry, defense IT sector, and some other sectors as well. From our perspective, we are really flexible when it comes to different types of partnership that could be established, and really eager to start this cooperation with all our partners here in the region.
Thank you. We will have a round of questions, but I will introduce now Ulrik to give your introductory remarks, and then we'll come back with some questions to you, Ambassador. Please, Ulrik.
Thank you. I would also begin by congratulating the Nordic Ukraine Forum on this important milestone, 10 years. Hats off for all your important work. And thank you, Torbjörn and Stockholm School of Economics for hosting us. Well, as you know, supporting Ukraine is and remains Sweden's #1 foreign policy priority. We do see it as the duty of the free world to help Ukraine win this war, and of course to win the peace. We believe in Ukraine, and we are investing indeed in the future of Ukraine, and not just any future, but Ukraine's future also as a member of the European Union. This is, I think, something we very much agree on, this direction. As you know, Sweden keeps providing a lot of military support, but also a lot of non-military civilian support for Ukraine's recovery and reconstruction and further development. And the way we see it, Europe really needs to be ready to assume even greater responsibility for security on our continent, for Ukraine. And Sweden for sure is ready to do our part of this. As the ambassador mentioned, we saw this week a meeting of prime ministers from the Nordic Baltic countries and Poland happening here in Sweden. And this was exactly what they discussed, that we need to step up even further. So for us, it's clear we will not just keep supporting, but ramp it up. As part of this, we want to work much closer together with the private sector. I think this is key. And when I meet Swedish companies, it's very clear that the will is there. If they're not already in Ukraine, they want to be there. The will is there. They know this is the right thing to do. They also know it's the smart thing to do, to invest in Ukraine. But then, of course, there are challenges and risks. And that it has been a bit difficult sometimes to see the entry points from the viewpoint of the private sector. But the architecture is now getting clearer, and the toolbox for assisting our companies in taking the step to invest in Ukraine is also being developed. Maybe we can come back to this later, so I don't speak too long in the beginning. So just to say that we will keep investing in Ukraine's future from the side of the government, from all sectors in Swedish society. And I think, as you mentioned, if we do it together, we're going to achieve much more. We do have already some 80 companies that have invested in Ukraine. They have a footprint there. I think Sweden is the 12th largest investor already, but that's not good enough. So we need more investment. We also need more trade in both directions. Again, to create more synergies between all of us in this room, that's the way forward. I'm going to stop there for now and can come back to some of the details. Thank you.
Thank you, Ulrik. Esben, you're involved in, of course, protecting what is already there in many ways in the defense sector. Can you please share with us how you're thinking about this? What's the long-term thinking? What's the short-term priorities?
Yeah,
please.
Happy to. Yeah, so I'm in Ukraine every month. I'm actually going there again tomorrow morning. And I have a tech startup background. So I built a company 20 years ago. We were surprisingly successful. So I have been investing in different startups for the last 10 years. So I'm chairing an industry organization in Denmark called Danish Tech Startups. We have nothing to do with defense until this Ukraine happened. So we decided to start an initiative we call Defense Innovation Highway. And normally as an industry organization, the end goal is always to make your members happy and to make sure that companies, they will make more money, Danish companies. But we decided when it comes to Ukraine, this is of such an importance for Ukraine, but also for Europe, that we said everything we do with Defense Innovation Highway and Ukraine has to be about purpose. And the purpose is for Ukraine to be able to defend themselves and win the war via defense innovation. So our focus is Ukraine and the Nordic countries, but our first priority in everything is to support defense innovation in Ukraine. Why? Because the speed is 10 times as fast as anything outside. We do many different things, but I would say the most important thing we do is that we do advocacy. So together with Ukrainian innovators, we say what are the things that the Nordic countries should do to support the defense innovation happening in Ukraine. Because as I see it now that I've been to Silicon Valley and been a part of this innovation ecosystem for the last 20 years, I will say that I think the innovation that we see in Ukraine right now is probably the most powerful innovation we've seen in Europe for 80 years. This is happening in spite of them having absolutely no money. So what we see in the news is that American companies and startups are now raising a lot of money because they have these big stories that in 3 years, US have to be able to fight with China with new defense technology. And so you see companies in America raising up to $1.5 billion. When these companies bring their companies to Ukraine and test them, the Ukrainians are laughing because they are very far behind the level in Ukraine. But the Ukrainian companies, nobody is investing in these companies. So last year, according to Brave One, which is the defense innovation cluster in Ukraine, $7 million were invested in total in Ukrainian companies. This is nothing. So what we are saying is that we need to prioritize these companies and invest into these companies. And then you can say, oh, it's because they are Ukrainian and international investors, they don't want to invest into these companies. But that's not the case, because many of the companies are establishing in Estonia or UK or US. They are founded by Ukrainians. But we are in a situation right now that if Ukrainian defense companies want to set up a company in Europe, it's almost impossible for them to get a bank account. That's the level we are on. There are so low-hanging fruits that we are not fixing for the Ukrainians. So here we are pushing and making recommendations. So next week we will publish our third round of recommendations to politicians for Danish, but also for Swedish and Norwegian and Finnish politicians. Yeah, so what is the problem? As we see the problem, it is that our politicians, our military, and our decision makers, basically, they are trained on traditional warfare. So it's ammunition, it's tanks, it's F-16 or Gripen. But what's going on in Ukraine is a total different game. So we are learning in Ukraine that sea drones can sink big naval ships, but still the Danish military half a year ago decided to use 40 billion Danish, so that's like 5 billion euro, on building new warships that are ready in 8 years. Why? Because the leaders of the marine in Denmark, they have used 40 years on sailing these ships, and this is all they know how to do. So of course they will not say we don't need ships, we need something that can sink ships, which is these very cheap, very innovative sea drones made in Ukraine. But of course, in Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland, we need a ton of these sea drones, because if Chinese or Russians ever do anything in our borders we don't like, we do like this and then they're gone. Instead, we are building ships because we are having a mindset of how war was done like before the war. So this is a big problem, because we are making decisions on the history and not on the future. So yeah, there is a lot of low-hanging fruits, both in the way that we could support Ukraine, but also in the way we could make smarter decisions on our own behalf. So this is part of what we are trying to do. Yeah.
Thank you. Excellent. Judith, you have the experience of both being a former ambassador to Ukraine and to Sweden. How do you see the opportunities to developing a strong partnership and investing our future together, Nordic, Ukraine? Maybe also UK, actually.
I sort of tend to feel that the UK is almost Nordic.
Yes.
That's what I'm banking on anyway. But I think it's an important point. I always come back to the fact that actually we are always stronger together in Europe. And what I'm really pleased to see, you have a couple of ex-ambassadors up here. You have some real current ambassadors sitting in the auditorium. I can see Norway, I can see Latvia, I can see Estonia. Thank you for coming, because you've had a bit of a week of it. You've been in Hobsund, and I think that sends a really strong signal to have the Nordic Baltic leaders plus Poland in Hobsund sending such a strong message on Ukraine, I think is really important, particularly against a really turbulent context. I get a little bit of a feeling of déjà vu sitting here with Roman, because we were both ambassadors in Ukraine at the same time. And I think we've sat together on many a panel, at many a conference, talking about the need to invest in Ukraine and to take Ukraine seriously. And I think the mood has changed a little bit. I think we have tended in the West to try and tell Ukraine what Ukraine should do. You can tell I'm no longer an ambassador, I'm speaking more frankly. But we have tended to tell Ukraine what Ukraine ought to do. And I think we need to come at this with a little bit more humility. Ukraine is fighting Russia, not us. Ukraine has that direct experience of fighting the adversary, not us. Ukraine should be training our soldiers rather than vice versa. And I think we have to understand that the war in Ukraine, Russia's war against Ukraine, is driving, as Esben said, innovation at a frantic pace. And what I keep saying to companies that are investing in Ukraine, expect Ukrainians to take your products, improve them and make them better. And send them back to you much more fit for purpose, because you've done it in theory, they're doing it in practice. So I think what we need to start talking about much more is partnership with Ukraine, and that understanding that we are in this together. We need to think short term, because we still need to ensure that Ukraine gets through this winter. So many of you on this stage will have more direct experiences, but I was having my Ukrainian lesson yesterday to try and keep my Ukrainian current. And my teacher lives on the 11th floor of an apartment block in Kyiv. She was tired. She had been up all night because the air raid sirens had been going all night. She had no electricity. She had no water because there was no electricity, so the pump was not taking water up to her floor. And she had no heating. And I said, how cold is it? She said, it's okay today. It's 1 degree in the apartment. So I just say that to remind people what we're actually looking at on a day-to-day basis here. So we have the immediate need, which is how we ensure Ukraine gets through this winter. And there is a place for innovation, but there is also a real need for mass scale provision of weapons that are cheap and effective. They don't have to be innovative, but you have to fight an adversary that has scale and mass. But you need that innovation to stay ahead of the game. And we need to be thinking in terms not just of defense, but the long-term survival of Ukraine. And those include investment needs such as infrastructure, particularly energy, housing, an absolutely critical need, education, and so on and so forth. So I would separate out that short-term and that long-term need. But what's wonderful about having worked in government and now stepping outside is that very clear understanding that a lot of our governments in this part of the world, I think, have got it largely right. But the assistance and the investment doesn't necessarily get there quick enough. We need governments, politicians, diplomats, civil servants to work much more closely with people like Esben and business. It needs to be a joint effort. It needs to be a whole of society effort, because this is in our neighborhood and this is going to affect us. It's affecting us already directly, but more importantly, it's affecting the Ukrainians now. And I come back to a slogan that we used a long time ago in Ukraine, but I think it still stands. It stands for people in this region, it stands for Europe, it stands for the Western world, but it also stands for Ukraine, which is Silnisha Razom. We are stronger together, and that means working together, government and business, but making sure that we're working extremely closely with the Ukrainians who know much better than we do.
Thank you. Excellent. Roman, you are also former ambassador to Ukraine. Can I just ask on a little bit more personal, we see so many people from Canada being very supportive of Ukraine. I know that there are maybe family links in history, but is it also a little bit your Nordic spirit that comes through here?
Certainly our cold weather spirit, yes. I mean, cold weather causes people to,
Couple up.
get together. But yes, obviously, the Nordic countries, for us in my previous Canadian diplomat life, were always the like-minded countries. And I think we are all now coming to an important test, because our high-minded, morally superior like-mindedness was in large part based on a US security cushion that allowed us to kind of play our own little roles. But now, if that cushion in certain respects is being taken away, how can we stick together? How can we innovate together? And I think that opens important niches, especially for a country like Sweden, but also other Nordic partners. When I think about Canada, I think about a country that has significant security and defense industry capacities, but largely as a component supplier. Sweden still has the infrastructure as an integrator that can generate entire products and weapon systems and supply them. And I think that is a very important asset, especially right now when the geometry of support systems, alliances is maybe not de jure, but de facto changing. And coming back to the meeting that happened here in Sweden this week. So I think you should not underestimate your Swedish and Nordic role. Try to drag countries like Canada along into this. I think it's interesting that last week, the Polish Prime Minister, I think, tweeted out that he had spoken with President Zelensky, Prime Minister Trudeau, and would be attending the meeting in Sweden this week. So they see a connection, and I think all of us should see that connection as well, because transatlanticism does not relate to only one country. In my new role as business ombudsman, I deal with individual complaints that companies might have about how they're treated by different parts of the Ukrainian government, and we try to resolve them. And in 2/3 of the cases, we successfully resolve them without it going to court. But we also are working on proposing systemic solutions so that those problems don't come up in the first place. And we'll be doing a report on the Miltech sector, regulatory barriers that could be improved. Again, you're saying yes, and if you're saying that the Ukrainians are moving 10 times as fast, then they're moving 20 times as fast as Canadian defense procurement, I must say, sadly. But given the situation they're in, they need to sometimes move even faster. So we're working on that, but we'll be very interested in your report and what it says about innovation and the links that need to be developed, because we need to think in new ways. We need to break out of these 40, 50-year-old encrusted ways. I mean, it's very good for militaries and others to have traditions, but it's also very important to react to what's happening here and now. And the war in Ukraine is a globally transformative event. It's not a regional conflict. If you look at the attention that's being paid in Japan to the war in Ukraine, if you look at the way countries like Australia are looking at it, Australia is right now the biggest single contributor of tanks to Ukraine. They are donating all of their retired, soon-to-be retired Abrams tanks to Ukraine. So it means that for those countries that are closer geographically, we need to be, in a sense, a sort of a hub for what is the global interest in what's happening. And that means being focused, but also being open to partnerships.
Thank you. We have a very important voice online. Timofiy, are you actually there?
Yes, I'm here.
Fantastic. There you are, on the beach.
That's not Kyiv.
Yeah, it's Kyiv, yeah. I'm at spiritual background. I haven't gotten much sleep because of the stupid drones are out of my window buzzing all night. It's really like I'm so tired that like I'm too tired to go to a shelter, but not too tired to respond to them and get freaked out. And there's no electricity, so we're running on generators, so I'm a little bit all over the place. But yes, I'm here, so I put this background to remind me of some normalcy.
Thank you. Let me just introduce you to the audience very briefly. Timofiy is, of course, really investing in the future of Ukraine by being the president of the Kyiv School of Economics. We just had a very inspiring board meeting where Timofiy outlined the strategy for the coming years for the school. Expanding campuses, getting new students to the school, expanding programs, of course also into engineering to meet the demands of different sectors of the Ukrainian society today. So Timofiy, would you like to share with us a few thoughts on how you see we should invest in the future of Ukraine, please?
Yes, absolutely. The question is, can I share a screen, because I want to show you maybe not a presentation, but a couple of products which I think would be useful. So now I'm allowed to share the screen. So okay, so first of all, I want to start with this, since we have been talking about a little bit about the investment into defense tech. So I would like to bring your attention to this report of October. We did together the Kyiv School of Economics Institute and Brave One, and I am one of the co-authors there. And it basically talks about the challenges, investments, and product innovations which are happening. And this is the report. It's available online. I'll send you a link, but you just can Google it up. Basically gives you an industry overview, gives you issues and challenges of the industry, and addresses or looks at product development trends in 4 areas: naval drones, ground drones, aerial drones, and electronic warfare. These are the main areas that we have looked at, and we have some case studies there, and I think it might be useful for those who want to get a kind of look at the market. Then we also have, I want to advertise this product. This is investment guide for Ukraine. This is a civilian investment opportunity. It's also available. You just Google it up, Investment Guide of Ukraine, Ministry of Economy, Kyiv School of Economics. It looks at all industries, and it has about 100+ cases there. So, but it's all civilian, okay? So this is the case of specific products and projects available in Ukraine, and also infrastructure around the investment, including the Ukraine facility, pillars through Brussels, which provide insurance or public financing for to sort of look at the risks. And so these are the areas in which there are opportunities: agri-food, transportation, logistics, energy, hydrogen, green steel, critical raw materials, housing, reconstruction and building materials, pharma, and information and communication technologies, basically high tech. So these are the areas, and then this is what we want to look. And finally, if in case you are interested, we have additional research that we're looking at. We have some research on Ukraine macroeconomic situation. We look at Russia economy, where it is relative to Ukraine. We look at confiscation of Russian assets, and we look at all how the sanctions work. But maybe that's not the topic of this conference. So I'm gonna stop sharing the screen right now and say what I think is extremely important in my view. This is like, if there were one thing I would to say, that would be this, that you all, together with investments, hold the key to Europe's security today. A strong Ukraine would mean, both economically and defense-wise, a stable Europe. A fallen Ukraine would mean a major crisis escalation and a sort of a cascade effect for the decades to come, for the generations. But without investments, Ukraine can defend itself, and instability is going to spread. And Nordic leadership here in supporting Ukraine militarily and humanitarianly during the war, and also already in rebuilding Ukraine economy, that is guaranteed to secure peace and strengthen defenses and create prosperity for everyone, both in Nordic countries, in Europe, but also in Ukraine. And this is, I think, that's my main point. Now, I personally am focusing on education, because Ukraine in such a difficult state right now that when we win the war, we want to have a place for kids to grow. We want to have a place for young generation to stay in the country or come back. They should not be robbed. Those who want to stay in Ukraine should not be robbed of an opportunity to get world-class education in Ukraine and work on rebuilding the country or building the country. So this is what we are working on. And it is unfortunately both immediate and strategic. Unfortunately immediate because we need this support as today, when there's simply the room, the street block around me is all in darkness. But our school is running due to support of people like you, and then specifically to the friends of KEC that Toby and people around the site and Stockholm School of Economics organized. And some of people in the audience, donors, and I thank you very, very sincerely from Ukraine in this difficult moment of time when Russia is advancing. The front lines are semi-collapsing. There is uncertainty about geopolitical support for Ukraine. This is going to be a dark winter. It's already a dark winter for Ukraine. It's not going to be as bad as 2022 winter, the winter of invasion. But I think we all should resist Putin's attempt at blackmail and emotional fear tactic intimidation, and continue to support Ukraine and build structures around Ukraine, because it's all in our very pragmatic self-interest. We want to live in peace in Europe, and therefore we need Ukraine to succeed in defending itself. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Timofiy. Excellent. Very nice to hear you and see you. We're always a bit worried when we see about all the air raid alerts that we can also follow from here, and thinking about you and the people at the school. So thanks for joining us. I just wanted to get back to all of you in the panel here, and including yourself, Timofiy. And then, of course, you can respond to what other people have said, and we can have a discussion, not so I just take too much of your time. But I just want to touch upon a little bit how we should think about priorities and timelines. I mean, we heard about how long it will take for ourselves to build defense capabilities. And I also heard similar things here, that, we're going to build up defense in the Nordic countries, in Poland, in the Warsaw Security Forum. Basically, every panelist was over-trumping each other about how many % of GDP they were going to spend on defense in the coming years. But when I listen to some of the urgent needs of Ukraine and the lags that we see in our own production, I mean, are we actually being good economists here and investing our defense money in the right way? Or should we basically just send all of this money that we're thinking about putting into our own defense down to Ukraine tomorrow, and let them invest and spend the money, and that will actually deliver security for ourselves as well? I know it's a bit difficult for Ulrik, I think, to answer this, but maybe some other panelists would like to have a go. Esben, please.
Yep. So when we made our first recommendations to the Danish defense minister in January, we said that when we donate money to Ukraine, we have to give them money to buy their own defense innovation products. So Danish military and politicians don't understand innovation, so they removed that part. But in the meetings in March, our defense minister discussed with the Ukrainians starting this Danish model, where Denmark was the first country to give Ukraine money to buy their own defense products. So that is up running now, and more countries are coming on board. This is the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do for several reasons. One, we are slow in the West to produce these things that we promised them. Two, it's sometimes 5, sometimes 10 times cheaper, and they know in Ukraine what they want and what they could produce, and it can be delivered much faster. So this is one area where I think we should do much more. And when I was in Ukraine last time, I was visiting a drone factory, one of the two-year-old company with around 250 employees now. They are building around 1,000 drones that can fly long into Russia and hit critical things in there. And I asked the CEO, I said, let's say that the defense minister or some powerful person would be in this room and ask you, can you produce not 1,000 the next year? Can you produce 8,000? Can you produce 10,000? So that we can pump more oil stuff in Russia. And he said, probably we could do that. The problem is that right now, MOD in Ukraine don't have budget to buy the 1,000 we can produce already. So the plan, and an urgent plan right now, should be, first, we make sure they have money to produce all that they have production capacity to do now, because they don't have that right now. Second, the critical companies, we ask them, how fast can you scale this production? Yeah.
Yes.
Could I just follow on that? Another angle, and it seems a bit counterintuitive, is also the question of exporting Ukrainian-made defense innovation. At the moment, there is an export ban. The ban is in place on the Ukrainian side, but it's largely, initially it was there because we don't have enough stuff, and so we should all stay in the country. Now we're in a situation where some of these factories have developed the capacity to make more than Ukraine can buy, and in some cases, more than it can actually use in a given time period. But the worry is that people like you, if they hear that Ukraine is exporting anything, will say, that's terrible. We're supposed to be giving them arms. They shouldn't be sending them to anyone else, including Denmark or Canada or anywhere else. Whereas it actually makes sense that if they do scale up, and if the production starts running, that whatever excess that they've innovated should actually usefully be sold to us, which in turn will then give them more money to be able to reinvest in continuing to innovate. So it means a greater integration of Ukrainian innovation into our own systems, even though they're a bit sclerotic. And it means signaling to the Ukrainians that they shouldn't be paranoid about sharing the innovation with others.
Judith.
I'd also take a little step back. Is Ukraine getting enough in time? No. But actually, if you look what has been achieved since the invasion, it's quite extraordinary. Europe was not geared up for a war on European territory. When I first started as a diplomat, we weren't talking about conventional warfare in Europe. We were talking about expeditionary operations in hot places, in deserts, which is a completely different set of capabilities. The UK had some tanks, but not as much as perhaps you might think, because we got rid of them. That wasn't how warfare was going to be fought. So in some ways, we need to give some credit for the huge effort that has gone into getting what has been transmitted so far. Is it enough? No, but that in itself is an effort. But there are a couple of problems. One, procurement. Some money is there. In a lot of cases, there is a lot of money that has been allocated that is sitting there. Why? Because it's not being matched with capability that actually is available. There's also capability there as well. The problem and the challenge we have in so many of our countries, as Roman has alluded to, is our procurement processes are so slow and bureaucratic that we're not able to get from that decision to actually getting the capability in place. That needs to speed up. This is wartime. You cannot spend months certifying and ticking boxes when it's needed on the front line, so that needs to change. You're also talking in some cases, you know, the innovation side is one thing, but you also need mass and effective scale on the other side, about production lines that perhaps haven't worked for a very long time. We need to start looking in our own societies for more engineers, more welders. How do we get the supply chains right, critical minerals? Because this isn't going away. We have short-term needs, but we now have a completely changed security picture on the European continent. And we need to look at processes, dull as they are, as much as we look at product.
Ambassador, would you like to add something on this?
Add a few words regarding the mentioned Danish model. It was, I think it's a huge success story, because we see that the Danish government invested and they produced 20 pieces of artillery, and they are now on the battlefield. So now this kind of initiatives which are supported by Swedish government, and we hope this initiative will be also joined by other Nordic partners. It's one way how to invest, let's say, fast money into production via a clear and accountable, let's say, algorithm that can be used and can be scaled up. It's only one thing. Definitely, we should place orders. We should place additional orders. For example, I've got a call from my colleague from one of the neighboring countries, ambassador, who is posted here and told me, look, my business company, who is actually supporting Ukrainians in, let's say, defense tech industry, they understand that there is a Swedish company that could support them. Please make the dots meet. Let them try to have this trilateral partnership and cooperation. Different ways. It doesn't mean that we are also very much in favor of having, let's say, global companies from Nordic region, from all our partners, to have their representation offices in Ukraine. But definitely this process requires a lot of time. But we have a number of ways how to do the same, but in a faster way, really in a faster way. I was once again a part of negotiations recently, and from our perspective, what we said, look, guys, can you do your proposal, how you see your participation in production of some equipment in Ukraine, let's say in 10 days? Will you be ready to provide us with all necessary documents? The next step, we're ready to come here, we're ready to invite you, we're ready to have Teams meeting, whatever is necessary, we will do. In 2 weeks, are you ready for that?
Thank you. Tymofiy.
Thank you. So I have some comments that I wanted to add. First of all, partly we are running into the problem of humans on the front lines, but also humans among engineers. So, there's this unprecedented quality of entrepreneurship and innovation driven by necessity and by the learned ability of Ukraine to mobilize its talent during critical moments, like the war, like previous revolutions. But the numbers of engineers, they are finite. So we opened, and I'm gonna, plug a product here. We opened 2 master programs in engineering this fall. One is for UAVs, for simple engineering of unmanned aerial vehicles. That's a proper, expedited, but still, 1.5 year master programs. And then we opened nano and micro electronics. That's chip design. This is electronics design. That's jointly with Etihad Zurich program, whereas UAV program is jointly with Ukrainian industry companies. We're now working on, because we have some talent, we have a lot of talent, we are bringing this talent into these programs, extremely popular programs. Actually, now we have more engineers at the Kyiv School of Economics than economists in graduate programs. Even though we're still called Kyiv School of Economics, maybe we should rename it into Kyiv School of Engineering. We're going to launch a general bachelor program next fall, but I think we also are working for outward programming, where we can attract engineers from Europe into graduate programs so that they can work together in teams with engineers in Ukraine. And so this is where I think this is something very, very practical that we can achieve, and we're looking for partnerships. So if I ask you to engage, I offer to engage with you, that we can have Ukrainian engineers through education and practical problem-oriented design essentially work together on innovation today. So the second point is about the expert. Expert is legally actually not banned. It's more of a political pressure, and the concern here is that the American establishment will use it, or whoever part will use it, or, we don't need to give them weapons because they're already, kind of expert in the weapons. And since a lot of politics now is one-liners, essentially, it will be very difficult to explain that, listen, this is a different type of weapons, this is the excess capacity. And, even if it's drones, it will be very difficult to explain why these drones are not being used on the front lines while someone is earning profits on that. So the question is how to create joint ventures and joint partnerships. And some of the companies have started building production in Poland, for example. Can you have ventures of that type so that we sort of make this political vulnerability less of an issue? So I think that's the real blocker. Then I think there is basically, I think, the reason for why we see so slow innovation in Europe and in the US and in Canada and in Australia and elsewhere, anywhere in NATO countries and elsewhere in the free world, is that because the doctrine is large platforms. People are used to still, even though people have gotten rid of large platforms like tanks, people are still used towards mentality of large platforms. Ukrainians don't even certify their own military innovations because by the time they certify it, it has already evolved. Because Russians evolve as well, daily, weekly, monthly. So no one is certifying. You kind of pre-certify something and then you fight your way around it, saying that it's the same platform, where in practice it is not, which is legally a violation. So I think this idea that we mostly operate with small platforms, which are essentially either kamikaze platforms or, expendable. That is very different mentality. We use, and we don't use military grade technologies. We use civilian technologies and use edge cases, trying to apply them to immediate military needs. So I think that's a change in mentality, which is fundamental, and it drives the speed of innovation. So this combination of the mentality that we're working in kamikaze environment, where everything is expendable, next week, and small platforms, is very, very different from the mentality of the established defense infrastructure and production in Europe and in the United States and in North America more generally. So, and it's not so easy to change because there are companies, there's investments, there are GR, there are laws, there are regulations. And I think Europe and NATO more generally has to change that, because the threat, Ukraine is not so much as an opportunity, rather than an illustration of a threat coming from Russia. Russia is going to innovate and will ignore any kind of regulations and will move towards the small platforms. And if they're going to combine, their information attacks with hybrid terrorist attacks in the future, post-Ukraine war, and it's only a question of time when a swarm of drones conducts a terrorist operation somewhere in a democratic country. So, we today have to prepare for that, and that requires a very different mentality. Thank you. These are the comments I had.
Thank you. Ulrik, I'm thinking, how do you see the interest from Swedish businesses to be part of this innovation sort of climate and sort of doing business in the interest of both themselves and in support of Ukraine?
Right. And I'm not going to comment much on the military side, as
Yes.
you rightly pointed out. That's not my focus, but super strong interest in the Swedish private sector. And as fellow panelists pointed out, there is this realization that we have everything to learn from Ukraine in sector after sector. And as was also said, we need to be able to do two things, or hold two thoughts at the same time. We need to keep responding to Ukraine's immediate needs, yes, but we also need to think long term. And I would just echo what was said about the energy sector. This is our single biggest area of support so far since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. Again, there are immediate needs. We need to do more and much more to meet those. Winter is here, but also, of course, long-term. Housing, health, healthcare, life science, just mentioning some sectors, the green shift, and of course, human capital, education, reskilling, upskilling. We're engaged in all of this, but so much more could be done, again, in partnership. I think that the Nordic countries, including my own, we have a lot to offer, and again, everything to learn. So that would be my short version.
Thank you. I think we should actually allow some questions and comments from the floor as well. Do we have some microphone? Anyone has a question already, or should I keep asking things while you're thinking? Sorry, Dominic. Yeah, in the back we have 2 hands up.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. All of the panel members, very important statements. It was mentioned by you gentlemen from Denmark that there are some 80 Swedish companies working together with Ukraine, inside Ukraine. I'm representing one of these, and I would like to share some of our most recent success and experiences. We are working with a team of world-leading scientists at the Ukrainian Institute of Science and Technology in Kyiv, located at the Maidan Square in Kyiv. They are coming from the very senior oil and gas and gemstone and mineral exploration industry, which is basically the same all over the planet, whether it is in Russia, where they have massive experience, but also in US, Europe, or Middle East. These guys, or team of approximately 15 people, have developed the world's first visualization system for the inside of planet Earth. For the very first time in modern time, we can visualize everything inside the planet, which is critical today, not only for Ukraine to survive and beat the enemy, but also for the planet and our human civilization to prosper in the future. We are sitting every week in Teams meetings with our colleagues in Kyiv, struggling with basic issues like language. We have to turn from Ukrainian, which I don't speak, and neither of my team. We have to try to understand Russian, which feels very crazy at that situation. But as we know from cultural and historical reasons, most senior scientists in Ukraine speak Russian as professional language. So that is one aspect. We are now gradually being found as a small company, Montlibre Group, here in Stockholm. I'm just coming back from Sao Paulo, where we have met the government, and they want to use this Swedish-Ukrainian technology. But it's also a delicate geopolitical balance because Brazil is part of BRICS, which means allied with Russia. But we now understand better, thanks to this delegation trip last week, that it's not about a love story between Brazil and Russia. It's about dependency on fertilizers from Russia into Brazil. Anyway, what I'm summarizing is that there is very much positive progress. We have state-of-the-art innovation underway and ready for immediate launch. And if any one of you are interested, you can find more about our activities at www.xgeo.se. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Did we have another question?
Can I just say,
comment?
I can recommend some very good Ukrainian language teachers.
Yes.
For the scientists.
Yes, I had a question. Ukraine has been a long time working to come closer to the European Union. And one of the things that European Union is standing for is to follow laws. And we have the law of public procurement. And my question to the panel is, in what way does the law of public procurement I can see that it might be an obstacle to be doing quick business when it comes to the arms sector, because for those of you who are not familiar with these laws, it's very, very strict how to do procurement for the government.
In terms of Ukraine, certainly, they have tried to streamline procedures while also making them more transparent by creating two standalone procurement agencies: the Defense Procurement Agency for lethal and the state operator for non-lethal purchases. Those are run by people who are public procurement specialists. They have, on the non-lethal side, a totally transparent, you can follow what they've been buying and who they've been buying it from. On the other side, no, you can't, and you shouldn't, because there is a need for secrecy there. But again, totally new structures which are trying to make things happen quickly within Ukrainian law, and also some of the antiquated rules around Ukraine's own Ministry of Defense, which also need updating. So our agency, Business Ombudsman Council, we are also doing, as I said, the study on regulatory barriers. So we are working with them to help them further streamline what they're doing, although they're already making great efforts of their own.
Thank you.
I comment also?
Yes, please.
So yeah, on the procurement side, MOD and governments are always too slow when it's wartime, also in Ukraine. So they are faster than they would be in Sweden or in Denmark, but a lot of the procurement have not in the beginning, and with all the innovation, has not happened with MOD.
Yep.
So Misha, that started a company where they are making like modern walkie-talkies, he has friends in the front line and they don't have a walkie-talkie. You have 1 million soldiers and they need to communicate. So you can either buy NATO standard stuff from America, maybe $10,000. You cannot get that for 1 million people. So he starts to do some consumer products, put it together, and it's like encrypted enough to work. And then he sells 2,000 or 3,000 to different brigades in the front line because they have their own budget. And then he goes to MOD in Ukraine and say, now all these soldiers and special forces are using it. Why don't you start buying it also? So this is one area. And so that's how it goes. Mm-hmm. Another thing is that in Ukraine, you have civil organizations that are raising money from private individuals. So old ladies coming and giving like 70 kroner, Swedish kroner, to this foundation because maybe they can collect enough money to buy one more drone for the front line. So some of the first ones that procured for the front line with drones was not MOD, it was civil organizations like Petula Foundation or Come Back Alive. So they have this very special role of being fast in many, many things because they can do what they say, what is needed, and not wait for some political thing. So the politicians are always too slow, but of course they are much faster now in Ukraine, but it's within the last year that MOD in Ukraine actually found out how to procure drones, because that was outside of MOD for a long time. Yeah.
Room for improvement in many dimensions.
Yes.
So we have one more question here.
Thank you. My name is Elizabeth Van Ringquist. I'm a tech investor, but I'm also a member of parliament. And I had the opportunity to go with, together with Ulrik to Kyiv a month ago. And I was very occupied with your talking about here, how we can make sure that we invest more in the tech sector there. But one thing is, I mean, it's impossible for most VCs to invest, as their LPs have very strong restrictions when it comes to making business and doing business in a war zone. So how have you been thinking about how to circumvent that? Because I think that is an incredibly important thing, and I've been discussing this a lot in the tech sector and tech industry here in Stockholm since we came back to try to figure out what we can do about it. Thank you.
Yes. So I have a... Okay, a short reply. So we had an event in Brussels 2 weeks ago, and one of the problems is that European Investment Bank, they are funding most of the VCs, venture capital in Europe. But the way they make money, as I understand it, and I was explained, is that they sell bonds to investors. Who is buying those bonds? China and Middle East and other investors. They don't like this money to go into European VCs that invest in defense. So as long as it's connected to European Investment Bank, it's probably never going to do anything else than dual use. And this is where we should look to the Estonians, because they are already saying that the enemy is not killing itself. So we also need to invest in defense. But we are not in Europe. So we need, on a European level, a separate entity where it's only about defense, because we are putting more money in defense now, but we are still way behind of the US. Yeah, so this has to happen very fast. And there, I think, in many cases, we should look to Estonians. Also, in this case, they were the first to have, among the Nordics and Baltics, to have a national state fund investing in defense startups, and also accepting that it has to be lethal, because it's crazy that we have to kill people, but we have to, because otherwise there is no Ukraine. Yeah.
I see a happy ambassador in the audience when you're talking like this. Ulrik, maybe would you like to add now? Anyone else on this topic? No? You're a very quiet audience tonight. Is it getting too late? I think I just wanted to follow up a little bit about different dimensions. So now we have basically focused on defense and military industries. Can we have a few other notes about what are the important things that we should thinking about when we talk about investing in the future in Ukraine? Do you have other specific areas you want to highlight? Timofiy has mentioned, of course, human capital, but are there other things in Ukraine that we should think about? Maybe, Ambassador, if you would like to add.
Definitely, we talked about the defense and defense tech industry today, and there are plenty more spheres that could be explored. Definitely, its capacity building, its energy sector, definitely its IT sector itself, definitely long before the big war started in Ukraine, we've been talking with our Swedish partners regarding how to use this excellent knowledge when it comes to waste processing to produce energy. So there are a number of projects, but I think when it comes to this region of Nordic and Baltic states, there are basically two approaches. One approach is, let's say, we call it political patronage, which means that, for example, the Danish government decided to take care and to support, for example, the region of Mykolaiv. I think Swedish government sticks to the position that it should be a sector-based approach. For example, together with other partners from Nordic and Baltic states and other friends, international friends, to support, let's say, industry across the country. So different ideas, but I think what is absolutely important, that we should start doing specific projects now, because timing, it really matters a lot for Ukraine. It's vital for Ukraine.
Ulrik, would you say Swedish companies has a specific sectoral interest?
I would just add to what the ambassador said, that we need to do concrete projects. One thing happening on the Ukrainian side that I think is very good for this is the establishment of the Strategic Investment Council under the Ukrainian government, and the work that is ongoing to create what's called a single project pipeline, basically covering all major investment needs and wishes on the Ukrainian side, on the national level, in the regions, and down to the municipal level. I think this is very good. Also, there is a lot of financing on the table, not least through the European Union's Ukraine facility and the specific pillar for investments. On our side, we're also developing sort of the architecture, the support mechanisms for our businesses to engage more. So we have Business Sweden in place in Kyiv to give hands-on support to Swedish companies, and not least to help them find Ukrainian partners. It's all about partnership. We're going to improve the export credit guarantees. We're beefing up what Swedfund is doing in Ukraine, both in terms of investing in Ukrainian companies and in doing pre-studies for bigger projects, and the list goes on. SIDA is here. You keep contributing a lot to all of this. Just to say that, in my opinion, the environment for companies to actually engage is improving. And if a company is not ready to establish their own footprint right now, we can at least trade more in both directions. And I believe that something everyone here can do, if nothing else works out, is to buy Ukrainian. If you need to import a product or a service anyhow, I'm sure you will find it in Ukraine. Very good way to support the Ukrainian economy and resilience. So there are lots of things to do, even for those who are not yet, but hopefully soon, ready to go all in and invest. Thank you.
Roman? That means also reframing Ukraine from risk to opportunity. I was in part of northwest Ukraine a couple of weeks ago, big furniture factory. It used to supply a very well-known and large Swedish company with a worldwide presence in this furniture sector, which I shall not name.
With the blue and yellow colors, maybe even.
Which stopped buying on day one of the full-scale invasion, saying, for us, the moral risk of seeing that some of your workers might be injured while making furniture for us, or even a truck delivering and somehow being hit, would be terrible. That, I think, is rather the wrong moral calculation in how to approach these things. So I fully support what Ulrik was saying, in that placing orders with Ukrainian factories is important. Ukraine needs to improve some of the procedures to make it easier as well. So there's work to be done there. But again, I've another internationally owned glass factory. If you buy French Hennessy cognac, it's in a Ukrainian bottle. They are suppliers. So Ukraine is already part of many international supply chains. I think they need to be further developed, activated, and people who want to be forward-leaning, who want to be helpful, need to adjust the framing of their risk management mechanisms to enable that to happen.
Would you like to add, Judith?
I think, what's the bigger risk? Not doing anything in Ukraine and then seeing what happens to the rest of Europe, or actually investing in Ukraine and holding our position within the European continent? So I agree with Roman. We need to look at risk in a totally different way. And I think we also need to look beyond defense, important as defense is. One of the biggest needs is housing. When I look at some of the housing solutions that I see, for example, in Sweden, and I won't mention any companies, but there are companies that build flat pack houses, which are Roman, these sorts of solutions are going to be absolutely essential to replace housing that has been destroyed. We're in one of the most innovative regions in the world. If you look at any measure for innovation and entrepreneurship, the Nordics come out on top. That has to be a very good match with a country like Ukraine, which has been driven there, but is operating in that space too. So for me, as somebody who is trying to be Nordic, I stand and look at this region and think, you have so much to contribute to Ukraine. You are ideally placed to do so. You're already doing a lot. But actually, if you can overcome that aversion to risk, and I say that in a country that for 200 years has not known much risk, so it's a bit of a leap, but actually that's what's going to have to happen.
We have a final question from the back.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Anastasia Klonova. I'm working for Skill Shift Initiative, Beredskapslyftet. We are running both projects in Ukraine, Reskill Ukraine, where we are educating women to become truck drivers, but we're also matching Ukrainians in Sweden to work with over 700 people who got the job through us. I was working previously, before the war here, I was working with the macro-regional strategies of European Union, where we looked very much into, now I want to talk about the risks of empowering people just to do many projects. And I want to hear your reflection on that. There are a lot of, I've been in Ukraine this summer, there are a lot of projects going on, small projects, big projects, and there is a huge lack of understanding what is already going on, which initiatives could be combined together. We had this experience also in Baltic Sea region. There is a need to connect the project between themselves and build the logical chains that will lead to the long-term impact. Because what we are doing now with the projects in Ukraine very often is just we are putting water on the fires everywhere. But what we have there is the learning. We have a huge impact on a small level, which needs to be scaled. So what is your opinion about having a good understanding, systematic understanding of mapping the initiatives, given a good background for building on them rather than copying, duplicating, doing the same things in a different ways? I know that is needed as well, but I want to point out the need of actually realizing what is already going on and how we can save the time and resources by using what is already up and running there and how to scale it. Thank you.
Thank you. Before you have a chance to respond, we're going to allow one final question, of course, from the ambassador from Estonia. Do we have a mic somewhere?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. So I don't have much questions because I think there is nothing to argue with you. What I want to say is that want to revoke this understanding, happy Estonian ambassador. I'll be happy the day when Ukraine wins the war and I have a drink or two with my Ukrainian friends in Kyiv on Plakhotniuk. This day makes me happy. But is to say that, yes, I think there are two sort of important phases. One, precisely, to make possible and to deliver Ukraine what Ukraine needs in order to win the war. Yes, that's my government idea. We invest into the defense sector, we cooperate with Ukrainians, and basically all what we produce goes to Ukraine. So what do we need? And second, this is really human side. I know Andrii or Tymofiy who said that Ukraine must have future. So my government does, it's a little share. We want to give hope for Ukrainians, and that's why we're working with Elena Zelenska Fund, our own SIDA, Estonian Development Fund, to renovate some places in Ukraine. For Estonia, Zhytomyr province is our kind of favorite, our province of priority because it corresponds to the size of Estonia. We reconstruct kindergartens, roads, and also working on the housing. And the reason being is we want to leave Ukrainians with clear understanding. We are with you, not only with military, but Ukrainian people to give and insist with little hope. If we all do that part, then there's be more hope. So thank you. That's really comment, not so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Dear panelists, final words before we wrap up. Response to the question here, other thoughts? Ambassador?
One remark only. If we have the success story, be it big or small or medium project that is successfully implemented in Ukraine, sometimes it's difficult to communicate in view of the war going on. But I think in the majority cases, especially when we're talking about the projects of, let's say, civilian nature, they should be properly communicated so that other friends here who are thinking whether to start or whether to return to Ukraine, they could also refer while making the decision to the success stories. This is absolutely important. The people should know that Ukrainians are ready to deliver, not crossing any kind of deadlines. They're producing. And if I may add a word to what Roman mentioned about the factory which supplies its products to world-famous Swedish company. There are actually 6 factories that were working for many, many years. And I remember myself forwarding the video message from the workers, Ukrainians, saying that, look, we want to continue. We want to continue to produce. It will support ourselves, our families, and it will support budget of Ukraine. We are ready to work in this reality.
Ulrik, I'm going to go down the list.
I will also pick up on your question about coordination. But first, let me just say how fantastic the work of the Skill Shift initiative is. Beredskapslyftet in Swedish. You're doing really important stuff. I also think it's a good example of synergies between official aid and the private sector. So just hats off for your work. Yes, I do agree that there is always a need to improve the coordination and to upskill things that are actually working. Good thing is that the in-country coordination in Ukraine is improving rapidly. there are sectorial working groups where the government of Ukraine and the international community are working closely together in each and every sector of importance, but also on some kind of overall level where I, together with Helena, represent Sweden in what's called the Ukraine donor platform, where we do the overall coordination between, again, the government of Ukraine, the G7 countries, the EU Commission, and 3 Nordic countries and a couple of others. So we are moving, I think, in the right direction. We need to connect dots. We need to scale up things that are working. So just to agree with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Esben.
So I started going to Estonia some 10 years ago. And when I was there, I felt this like innovation energy that was different than other countries I was visiting. And last week I was in Estonia with a Danish delegation, and we met with some of those startups 10 years ago that now are Bolt and other absolute leading companies. And when I go to Ukraine, I feel the same energy as I felt 10 years ago in Estonia. It's just much wilder. So Europe, where we have a strong Ukraine, I believe if we think about the Draghi report, the big problem in Europe is that the last 30 years, all the biggest companies in the world have been built in China and in the US. And that's fine as long as we can trust the Americans, but we can't trust the Americans anymore. So we are in deep shit because all the big companies are built outside of Europe, except one from Netherlands. So the big problem is a democratic problem, because if US goes big time down this Hungary road, we miss 25% of global GDP that usually had democratic values but no longer can be trusted. All other democracies, except for Estonia, you can discuss also Israel, but we are on the back of the bus when it comes to being the innovation economies of the world. It's very, very important that all democratic countries will be the leading innovation economies in the future. And that is where Estonia is a lighthouse, because you're really doing good things there. And I actually believe that the countries that manage to work close with Ukraine on the defense innovation happening right now will learn so much from this that we will potentially be managing to get in the front of the innovation bus globally if we do this. But right now, I don't see Denmark and Sweden getting it and joining this. So Estonia and Ukraine, if Europe in the future will build the biggest companies of the world, I believe it will come from Estonia or Ukraine, not from Sweden and Denmark. Why? Because we have so many big old companies, and they are kind of like big in lobbying and in politics, and so we are favoring all the big ones, Novo Nordisk and Lego and Maersk, etc., which is fine, but we need to focus on the future like Estonia and Ukraine.
Okay. Soon the ambassador will have to pay you a salary as
As I say, you're making Thomas a very happy man. I haven't seen him smile that much for a very long time. Just very, very quickly, because I'm aware there are other things that we are going on to do. Whatever happens with the US, collectively, Europe has the ability to look after itself. But that means investment, that means working together, and it means thinking long-term as well as short-term. So I think we have to move beyond the fear and the panic and understand that actually we can do this. And actually, Ukraine gives us that imperative. That's really important. I completely agree on the need for an inventory of projects and initiatives. I have long thought, and we saw this when we were in Ukraine back in 2015 to 2019, that there is a sense sometimes of Ukraine being bombarded with lots of initiatives, and it's there and it's here, and you've got to be very grateful for everyone, and it's, that's tough. And I think that's incumbent upon us as well to actually understand what the broad spread of projects is and how we synchronize that a little more, because otherwise it just overloads the system, which is already obviously busy doing other things. And then I think finally, I've been very struck by conversations I've had since jumping into the private sector with lots of people thinking about investing in Ukraine and how they're going to do it. And at no point do they actually talk to a Ukrainian. And so my sort of sense is, if you go away with anything, ask a Ukrainian, and also think about the Ukrainians that have come here from Ukraine, who have left very good jobs, are extremely well educated, but may not find that their talents are being used in Sweden or other countries. Ask a Ukrainian, find a Ukrainian. You have lots of them here. They can help you.
Yes, excellent. Thank you, Roman.
Thank you. And I think it's also important to realize that there has been, not just in the tech sector, but generally a sort of a generational change in Ukrainian business. You now have a kind of Ukrainian Mittelstand, to use the sort of the German notion, of companies that have been created over the last 20 years, that are new, that are innovative, and in many cases have reacted to the current crisis by expanding into the EU, just because they are more resilient, they are more flexible. So again, it means shifting the notion of what is possible, that there are companies that have doubled and tripled their sales in the last 2.5 years while working under electricity cutoffs, bombardment, etc. So I think there's a need to overcome our very comfortable perceptions and move into the kind of innovation discomfort zone where the Ukrainians have been pushed, but they're actually doing quite well in it, and we can learn from them and maybe then take it to third countries as partners. So I think there's considerable scope, and that we just need to grow up a bit and get over some of our own preconceptions and do it.
Timofiy, before you fall asleep, you now get the final word of this panel discussion.
Thank you. I'm struggling. This is sleepless nights. Yeah. Thank you very much for supporting Ukraine. And we are all in this together, and we have to build more horizontal relationships between businesses, both civilians and defense, because that will bring security to Europe. It could be done through investments, it could be done through joint ventures, it could be done through all kinds of exchanges of technology, practices, partnerships. We should be all actively looking how to build more relationships between Ukrainian businesses and European businesses.
Thank you. On that very productive note, let's give our panel speakers a big warm hand of thanks. Thank you, Timofiy.
Yes.
If you don't mind, you're allowed back into your seats, and we're going to invite back Alina on the stage. A warm hand for you as well. Welcome back. Dominique?
Now? Yeah, perfect. So I'm very grateful for this inspiring discussion, and indeed there are so many things to discuss, and I'm so happy that we will have time for this. So with Nordic Ukraine Forum we have prepared the special program, because you know that today we are also celebrating our 10th anniversary. And before we start with that exciting program with mingling and discussion, I would like to give a glimpse of what have been done in Nordic Ukraine Forum through the years, so you have better impression, and probably you can also find yourself here on some of the photos. So we've started in 2013 because of the Revolution of Dignity, or Euromaidan. So young Ukrainians who were at that time in Sweden, they organized themselves to go to the streets to demonstrate and to support Euromaidan, democracy, European values, and their wish for Ukraine to be part of the European Union. So that was the reason, and 10 years later we are doing similar things, but the scale is a different one. So our aim was and is to build bridges between Sweden and Ukraine and Nordic and Ukraine. We think it's very crucial that we as Ukrainians learn from Nordic countries, and that we can all share the future, and we have the common goal. We have different streams: advocacy, demonstrations, aid to Ukraine and Ukrainians. And advocacy is our strongest side. There are so many things that we've been doing, writing to the media, commenting, contacting politicians, decision makers, organizing panel discussions, partnering with various civil society actors, doing advocacy through cultural events, and many more. You probably know us also through the demonstration that we organize. So each Sunday at Sergel Story, 12 o'clock, you can find us, and we are always very happy to give words to everyone who would like to speak there. Of course, the big demonstration in support of Ukraine have been organized together with our colleagues, with our friends, on the 24th of February. According to the media, the last 24th of February demonstration was there were almost 10,000 people who came to support us, and the Prime Minister who was given a speech and other ministers. So it's a big honor, and we feel this unity during this event that we organized. Also, we are part of the Stockholm Pride, where there is the Ukrainian column. Moreover, there are such events like Ukraine Independence Day that we always celebrate in the Sergel Story. You can also already save the date and join us on the 24th of August there. Aid to Ukraine, that was crucial at the beginning of the large-scale war, and now we also are partners with different humanitarian organizations, in particular those who are presented here. And you will learn more about those partnerships later on. But as you've heard in our title, there is this component of Nordic that is important. So we are also present in other countries. We are organizing during the last couple of years the Nordic Ukraine Advocacy Summit, where we gather different advocacy organizations that also want to voice Ukraine, to support us. And so we've organized together with all our colleagues from other Nordic Baltic countries such event in Stockholm this summer, in Helsinki, and the next one will be planned for Oslo. Moreover, we are part of Romada. This is the Nordic Baltic knowledge-based network. So there are academics who are studying Ukraine and who will be contributing from this expert type of knowledge to the rebuilding, reconstruction. And as their outcome of these activities, we organized together with our colleagues the conferences. Last one in Oslo, this year was in Riga, and next one is planned to Stockholm. Finally, we think it is very important to help young Ukrainians who are now in the Nordics, in the Baltics, and they need this feeling that they are not alone and that they can also be part of their hosting societies, and also that they can be feeling this connection with Ukraine. So together with other partners, we have established the leadership program for young Ukrainians. And the first group of Ukrainians have already visited Norway, Lillehammer, where they have gathered to talk and to have the workshops. And we will have already the next generation of youngsters coming to Lillehammer this February. Finally, future plans. We think it is important to continue advocacy and organizing discussions, lectures, everything that we do. But also it is important, as I mentioned, to work with young Ukrainians and also with Ukrainians who are in Ukraine. So establishing programs, leadership programs, everything that can connect us together is crucial. So we want to work more in this. And so if there are any ideas and your perspectives and visions, how we can unite these young spirits together, please don't hesitate to come to any of us at Nordic Ukraine Forum. We think it is crucial to have a place to meet. The point where both Ukrainian community and also Swedish community and international community can come and learn about each other. And so opening the Ukrainian house is something that we are seeing the opportunity to do, and also very open for your advice in this regards. And of course, continue collaboration with various actors working with Ukraine. So on this note, I would like to finish the presentation.